Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. I am this morning's Sunday service coordinator. My name is Anya Westenberg, and my pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I have been a member of this congregation since I can remember, and I recently joined the Sunday services team. Now is a great time to silence your phones if you have not done so already. And before we begin, a few quick announcements. Next Sunday, January 5th, will be a busy Sunday. Jeremy Kleinfarrell, the lead organizer of Justice Southbury in Southbury, Connecticut, will be leading a service titled Grassroots, in which he'll reflect on the organizing efforts of that community. It will also be a Share the Plate Sunday, with half of the offering going to the UU Disaster Relief Fund. After coffee following the service next Sunday at 11:30, please consider sticking around to help take down our Christmas tree and get it moved back into the basement of the cottage. It's a big job, but many hands make light work. At 4 p.m. on the same day, there will be a concert here, part of the Music at the Ridge series. So come enjoy some music from George Malice and Louise Coombs. Tickets are $25. And now let's settle in. You may arrive this morning tired and weary, or upbeat, feeling great. However you're feeling, whether it's like the mood outdoors or not, you're invited to laugh, cry, talk, or be as silent as you need to be. As we gather here this morning, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Pugwasit people, and we're still talking about how we might live differently as a result of this. Now let's take a moment to greet one another. For the few of us here, let's wave to the camera.
Wave to the camera.
Okay. There's so many. We make this time and place holy simply by being together with each other. Even if it's not a lot of us, it's still holy. As we light the flaming chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, please join me in reciting the words to our chalice lighting affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another, and celebrate life. During all of our music today, Reverend Sierra Marie invites you to rise in body or in spirit, to sit, stand, dance, kneel, sway, clap, to move, or be still in the ways that your mind, body, and spirit call you to do. Please join in singing our hymn of welcome, number 346 in the Gray Hymnal, Come Sing a Song with Me. The words will be on the screen.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. That I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. And I might know when hope is hard to find. And love is all of love that grows in the winter time.
Children's affirmation.
Now, please join me in the children's affirmation. We are Unitarian, Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other.
Oh, good morning. It is good to be together. I know I say it almost every Sunday. My first supervising minister, the Reverend Arthur Vaney, now retired, used to say it every Sunday. It changed me to be reminded of it every week, week in and week out. And it's such a core belief of mine that now I say it too. It is good to be together. It's good to be together here in service, online. What incredible gift of technology we have there. And in the room, oh my gosh, we remember what it was like when we could not gather, what a gift it is to be here. And it is good to be together sharing this time on the planet. I'm glad you, beloved one, I'm glad you are here. I'm glad you are breathing on this earth with me. You are truly, truly, truly beloved, and it truly is good to be together. Today's story is from the life of the Buddha, and it's a version of the story adapted from a telling by the Reverend Jude Geiger. He was a fancy man, the Buddha, then known as Siddhartha Gautama. He was a prince. He was wealthy, ever surrounded by ease and joy and beauty. Who here has only ever been surrounded by ease and joy and beauty your whole life? Can you imagine? And so he lived in that excess. And he was a good man, a kind man. His family, the royalty, protected him in all the ways possible from seeing the world as it was. But one day, though everything had been provided to him and he had no reason to want for anything or go anywhere, he left the palace and its gardens. And in his travels, he came across people who would change his way of being. First, he came across an old man, frail, stooped over, and he had never seen this before. Imagine that. Imagine living in a palace where only the young were permitted. Imagine not ever having seen all of humanity, all of its forms, all of its stages. Maybe it's not so hard to imagine. We still sometimes tuck away aging and the vulnerability and even ill health of bodies. We still, in this age, in this society, pressure one another to keep it hidden. In any case, he was stunned with the way the body changes over a lifetime. He realized that growing old is a part of life, that he too was headed in that direction. We're all headed in that direction. Some of us are already like the old man. Some of us are in our midlife feeling the twinges of that body that lies ahead. It's snuck up on some of us. But here we are in human bodies that age every day, never growing younger. He kept traveling, and then he came across someone who was sick. He had never seen sickness before, of course, never been sick. His whole world had been set up to revolve around his comfort, his well-being, his needs. And though it wasn't his choice, it shaped what he knew. He didn't live like others. He never had to say he couldn't come to work because he was ill. He never had to tend nervously to an ill loved one, wondering when or if they would get better. This was all new to him. He kept traveling, and he saw someone dead on the side of the road. That's hard. That's hard for many people to imagine what it would be like walking and seeing someone dead on the side of the road. And most of us have seen death. But he hadn't until this very moment. He had never seen death. And this changed him. He knew he could not live the same way afterward. So ends the story. I want to wish those who celebrate a happy Hanukkah, a meaningful Kwanzaa, a sweet fifth day of Christmas, or a fun Three Kings Day, and or all the best when the New Year bells get rung early Wednesday morning. Another trip around the sun is beginning. We are getting older. The ride is only so long, and desire may cause suffering. But friends, I still really hope that this holiday season has been and will keep being, or will start being, lovely for you. And if not lovely, that you can tap into the mysterious love that holds us. Feel it somehow as gravity or breath or small kindness in this season. That said, the Buddha's search for a different way eventually led him to a middle path, a way of being present, of attending to life as it is. Let's be present now to our own lives just as they are, beautiful and tragic, present to our precious hearts to the extent that that makes sense for each of us. It's always an invitation. Take what you need, leave the rest. I'll offer a prayer followed by a time of silence during which, if you find yourself uncomfortable, as many people do in silence, I invite you to simply notice that you are being held by the floor underneath you. The silence will end with the sound of a bell. This morning's prayer was written by Sally Katovich. Spirit of life and death, thou who art as present to us in our suffering as in our well-being, abide with us in this time. Soothe the secret pains we carry. Bless us with the courage to move toward our grief and not away. When all is hidden, when we find ourselves among the shadows, when we do not know the way, quiet our hearts, still our restlessness. Help us embrace the unknown, to hold the mystery, and to let ourselves be held by it. For thou art the great hiddenness, and yet we know that our breath is not so close as thy presence. Abide with us, O Spirit of compassion, as the power of healing, the assurance of peace, the love that will not let us go. So may it be. May it be so. In a moment, we'll hold the joys and sorrows of this community. Though we know that the personal is political and the political is personal, we reserve this time for the milestones of our own lives and the lives of those we know most personally, our dear friends and family. And so I have lit this candle for all the joys and sorrows which we know will be unspoken, but that we no less hold in our hearts in this time, especially as interconnected people whose hearts are made for justice and love. This candle is for the broader community and the world community, including especially those under siege, under violent conditions and oppression, for those living in fear or deprivation, for all those in trouble or in distress. It's time now for silent milestones. For those of you in the room, I will invite you to come forward to drop a stone of joy or sorrow in the water where its ripples can be witnessed without anything ever having been spoken. And for those of you online, you can put an X in the chat to acknowledge your own unspoken joys and sorrows. Let's begin. In speech and in silence. We'll simply breathe together in quiet for a minute or so before singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stir of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life a shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
The reading we're about to hear is from an ordination sermon given by the Reverend Kimberly Crawford Harvey during a 2016 ordination service for Reverend Joanna Lubkin. This audio clip, well, actually, we're not going to play the audio clip because the sound wasn't too good, but I'll read it to you, is from it's courtesy of an episode of the Pamphlet, a UU history podcast from the same year. This particular episode of the podcast is about Reverend Kimberly's ministry in Provincetown, Massachusetts during the early years of the AIDS epidemic. In the clip, she talks about that time, but she doesn't mention AIDS itself. Instead, she mentions one of the deadly results of AIDS, Kaposi's sarcoma, a cancer that forms in the lining of blood and lymph vessels that causes lesions of the skin. You can find the whole episode online in the Harvard Library Square archive, and I highly recommend it. It is powerful and instructive. Here's the reading. I can remember motoring far out into Provincetown Bay on a late Sunday afternoon with my parishioner Paul Richards, a big, blonde, boyish Midwesterner with a Baptist heart. He used to recruit new church members by inviting groups of 6 friends at a time to Sunday brunch at his beautiful waterfront home. The hitch was that the invitation started with the church service from 11 to 12. If you planned to eat, you had to meet Paul in his pew. He was shameless. He was charming. The Kaposi sarcoma that would kill him in a few months had just erupted on his calf. Rocking peacefully at anchor, he savored what, unknown to both of us, would be his last boat ride. But the temptation to drown in sorrow threatened to undo me. It was Paul who separated the pain from the suffering. Even if it kills every single one of us, he said, even if there is no one left to tell the stories, it matters that we care for each other in all this madness. It matters that even in the face of death, we love each other well. So ends the reading.
Well, I'm not quite sure how I can compete with that. But it is time for the offering. We have to remember that when we give our time and energy to the work of this congregation and when we donate to its financial support, we are giving gifts to each other. Together, we also give to the community around us. This morning, our greeters will take up a collection of financial gifts for the congregation. If you prefer, you may mail a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road in Danbury, or use the QR code on the screen. At the same time that we take up this collection for the congregation, we will collect non-perishable foods for Dorothy Day Hospitality House. Thank you for your generosity toward one another and toward Dorothy Day.
I'm going to talk about HIV and AIDS a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about my experiences as a queer youth and young adult in an area of the country at a time when that was quite difficult. If there's something you need to do to take care of yourself through this part of my reflections, which will go on for the next 6 minutes or so, I invite you to give your heart the gift of that tender care. I grew up in the height of the AIDS crisis, and I came of age in its wake. Though there is now evidence that the human immunodeficiency virus that causes AIDS may have had its origins as early as the 1920s in Northern and Central Europe, and the first recorded Death resulting from the virus was in 1959. The number of cases did not rise to public attention in the United States until the early 80s, when I was a baby. Those of you old enough to have been there will remember that in those days, little was understood about it, but it was still called by many a gay disease. It was an illness of great stigma and also fear. In the podcast we just heard a little bit from this morning, Reverend Kim Crawford Harvey described nurses and doctors refusing to see her congregants in the hospital, not entering their rooms for care out of the fear that they too would become sick. She described holding one honest funeral for congregants and friends and another for families who would tell people their loved ones had died of cancer. I was 10 years old when the Ryan White story was released, a movie about a child who contracted HIV from a blood transfusion. It was a groundbreaking movie at the time, challenging the discrimination experienced by people with HIV and AIDS, and challenging the stigma too, but doing so by using the story of a child's illness to implicitly contrast the story of the gay disease. See, it seemed to me to say, have compassion because not everyone who has the disease is at fault. Some people get it through no fault of their own. I spent the second portion of my childhood in Colorado, surrounded by a combination of Catholic churches and growing evangelical megachurches that preached that gayness was a sin punishable by death via HIV. My junior high civics teacher was awarded Teacher of the Year multiple years in a row, partly because he was known for capturing the attention of students by not shying away from what he said were the controversies of the day. He felt that debating the civil rights of those of us who in those days were still often called homosexuals taught us civil engagement. Never mind that we all knew what megachurch he attended, what his own beliefs were. When I was 13, I had my mom excuse me from school at least once so I could go protest, urging people to vote against Colorado's Amendment 2, a constitutional ballot measure preventing local anti-discrimination laws that would protect lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. It passed by vote anyway and wasn't declared unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court for 4 more years. I was nearly an adult by then. I will always be grateful for the adult queers after having lost a generation of gay men who in healthy and protective ways took us baby queers under their wings. For the 2 lesbian bookstore owners who introduced my boyfriends and girlfriends and me to folk musicians and potlucks and books about commitment ceremonies for same-sex couples. For the local Pride volunteers who worked so hard to keep a support group running for us teens, giving us a place to blow off steam and celebrate who we were. For the ever-rotating owners of the unmarked LGBT nightclub, hidden among warehouses and wholesale facilities in part of town otherwise dedicated to industry. They knew we had nowhere else to go. So they let us kids in without letting us buy alcohol and kept a special eye on us so we too could dance. Matthew Shepard used to go to that nightclub. He drove about an hour down from Wyoming. He died in the hospital where I worked, while friends held a vigil outside. It was a chilling time to be part of the queer community. In context, in that environment, it felt like a warning. My now wife moved to Colorado right after Matthew's death, and we started dating not long after her arrival. I was 19. When my coworkers asked what I was doing on my days off, I made sure to misgender my now wife, talking about the things I do with my boyfriend just in case. We didn't hold hands or kiss in public. We didn't walk too close. I recall a time when even not walking close, a man on the street spit on us, swearing and yelling about us dykes. We married in front of God and our family and friends in a Unitarian Universalist church in 2002, in Massachusetts, actually, the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. But it wasn't legalized yet. And even if it had been, we were living in Washington state at the time and wouldn't have qualified being out of state residents. I remember how even though the Unitarian Universalist Association allowed the church I worked for to add my wife onto my health insurance, their contributions toward her insurance were considered taxable income for me by the IRS because she was, quote, unrelated to me. We were married for 13 years and well into raising a family before we received the federal protections of marriage, protections we now are advised we must secure again with new legal paperwork, just in case. Some of you might have your own stories to tell. Some of your stories might go back even further, when some of the things my wife and I dared to dream about doing in our lifetimes were unfathomable. And of course, it's entirely possible. Some of your stories involve layers of identity I don't share and experiences of queerness, whether gay manhood or being transgender, that I haven't had as a pansexual cisgender woman. But I open with these stories because I want to talk about courage. And courage as a spiritual practice in my life came partly out of these formative experiences. I don't know. How are you all entering into the new year? Maybe some of you have some things you're looking forward to. Anybody? What do you got? Yeah. I'm not supposed to say maybe next week. All right. Some news, some news. Who else? Who else? Anybody else got something you're looking forward to? What are you looking forward to?
I'm a little scared, but I'm looking forward to that new job
Oh,
as a teacher for CLTI.
oh
If
my
we get enough
goodness.
applicants.
Fantastic. Gina's looking forward to her new job. That is so good. I'm so glad for your new job. What else? Well, maybe it'll be the birth of a baby or grandbaby, the marriage of a friend, a relationship in your own life that hasn't even started to blossom yet. Starting a new job or moving to a new home, taking a long dreamed of trip or seeing a longtime friend who's taking their own trip. I don't know. I don't know. There may be countless joys ahead of you, friends. But that's the thing. None of us knows. There could be countless joys, and there could just as easily be sorrows around the corner. Illnesses, deaths, the end of relationships, the loss of jobs, the need to move from our homes even when it's not wanted, trips canceled for reasons that can't now be foretold. Hey, we live in an era of climate change. How about natural disasters? And some of us have been more like Prince Gautama than others. The closer we are to the artificial paradise of the palace, the less courage we need. Currently, the American Civil Liberties Union is tracking 574 anti-LGBTQ bills in the U.S. 574 right now. And while they're not tracking any in Connecticut in 2024, there were 2 to track in Connecticut in 2023. Now, that's just one set of issues. Most people don't live in a palace, and the realities of the year ahead are particularly stark for some. My colleague, Reverend Anya Samler Michael, began a sermon on courage with these words. She said, "So fear precedes courage. Fear always precedes courage." End quote. But like Gautama, aware of the pain of our human living condition, we keep going anyway. We move into the unknown future. Movement, I have found, is a key to courage. When I was in social work school, I was trained in a model of emergency response to traumatic events, what to do for someone in the first moments after a catastrophe. One of the first things I learned is to engage cognition through bodily movement, if at all possible. Let's go get some water from the medics. Should we find a bench to sit on? We move not to hide. In fact, we might need to keep the scene of our pain in view so we can remember the parts of the story that we will need to put in order in sequence very soon. But we move to become agents of our experiences again, to reinvigorate the parts of our brain that have been suppressed in the moment of catastrophe in the interest of survival. That is a technique for a singular event that has threatened us all the way to the existential level. But the importance of movement is mirrored in the kind of courage building that is needed to keep living into what is next, when what is next has the capacity to singularly or chronically threaten us at an existential level, which is to say, even as we made plans for safety and took actions for our own protection in community, my now wife and I did not stop living in response to the conditions of our oppression. We still moved in together even when we couldn't walk too closely to one another on the street or in a restaurant. Heck, to this day, there are plenty of places where I would never dream of holding my wife's hand or giving her a peck on the cheek. But we have made a life together anyway. We got married, we moved around the country together, we raised children, we brought cakes to new neighbors, we attended to life as it was, but we refused to stay frozen in fear, to preemptively stop living in anticipation of the ways the beauty of our lives might be stolen from us. We kept going. We kept going. Another part of the emergency trauma response for social work is helping people to prevent major disruptions to their life story by helping them put their catastrophic event into a sequence that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this too is mirrored in the everyday kind of gathering courage to move into what is next. We can use stories to help us cope with circumstances we can't control. My colleague, Reverend Jamie Dingus, talks about this as knowing who we are and whose we are and reaching out in love. My faith tradition, our shared faith tradition, Unitarian Universalism, teaches me that I'm part of life's great longing for itself, which in its greatest expression is love. I belong to the interdependent web of all existence, and by way of that connection, am here to love. Thinking back on the unexpected deaths I have experienced over the last few years, first my mother-in-law, who was truly a second mother to me, and within months of that, my sister-in-law, who died of COVID, by the way, and then my father-in-law last year, I resonate deeply with the kind of love that Reverend Kimberly described in the story she offered to us from her parishioner, Paul Richards, even though the circumstances were so different. It is love in this case that is the source of my pain. But as a member of the human family, This is the best story we have for what we are here for. And I have been lucky to get to do it. It is from this clarity about who we are and whose we are, Reverend Jamie says, that we develop courage that can help us transform our world and alleviate the pain that comes from systems of oppression, for example. I'll tell you a story of how my wife and I first became foster parents many years ago. I'll tell it with caution, knowing with time and experience that this call on our lives is no easy one, and that not everyone should answer the same call. But only a couple of months after my wife and I got married, I was 22 then, by the way, while I was working a new job, and we had a brand new puppy in our home, I got a call from someone who knew one of the congregants in the church where I worked. She was from a youth services organization in town, and I thought perhaps she wanted to talk with me about a youth in my program or a volunteer opportunity for my congregants. But instead, she told me, I have this 15-year-old trans kid in foster care who has been in 22 homes, and I can't find another placement for this kid, at least not one that would be safe and accepting. Would you be willing to become a foster parent so this child can come live with you? It was a reckless, desperate question, and I knew it even then. Do you know how old I am? I asked her. I wouldn't be asking you if I didn't believe your congregant when they told me you could do this, she said. My wife and I couldn't decide what to do. We did not have the courage to say yes at that point. We debated. We made lists of pros and cons and fears and things we thought we'd need if we were going to be successful. We met the kid and didn't feel any clearer. We asked people for advice. We sought wise counsel. Finally, we decided to pray together, asking for clarity that I now understand is the kind of clarity Reverend Jamie talks about. Clarity about who we were, whose we were, and how we could reach out in love from the limitations of our own capacities at that stage in our lives. We remember it differently, the two of us, and I think my memory has become less clear over time, but here's how I remember it right now. We prayed, and then we looked at each other, and we both said at once, let's do this. The thing that had become clear in prayer is that there is a universal love for each of us, and we get to be that love for each other. We get to be that love for each other. This kid had no choice about the pain of their circumstances, but we did. And the only choice that seemed right, given that, was to make sure that this kid was not alone in all of it, to keep going like Guatemala in turning toward the pain. The courage came from the story of who we were and what we were meant for in that moment, and then the movement into that purpose. So here we are on the cusp of a new year with the promise as well as plenty of reason to fear. Maybe not for those close to the palace, but for many of us. Fear precedes courage. Let's not freeze in fear. Let's keep moving together, claiming joy and the fullness of our lives as we go, loving the hell out of this world, whatever is ahead. Please join me in singing Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way. the road from peace and giving, love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame.
Until we are together. For our departing, a blessing and a prayer from the Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto. Spirit of light that shines among and between us, light that can reach the loneliest moments, even as they threaten to engulf us, here in the places made holy by each of us. In this hour that we have made sacred with our attention, we pray. We pray for peace. We pray for healing. We pray for lives to be made by our actions into manifestations of love. If hope is an action, give us the 5 more minutes of courage that we need to act our way into new hope, new futures, new compassion. May love guide us. With thanks we say, amen.